Standard Instrument Departures, or SIDs, and Standard Terminal Arrival Routes, STARS, were created to expedite an orderly and safe flow of IFR departures and arrivals at busy terminal areas. SIDs and STARS have other benefits as well. They provide an obstruction-free flight path, furnish a clear procedure to follow in case you lose communications with ATC, and often incorporate noise abatement procedures. In addition, they reduce pilot-controller communications and workload. For example, prior to SIDs and STARS, a clearance might have sounded like this.
Crusader 90832 Charlie, clear to the Tampa Airport as filed. Maintain 15,000, maintain runway heading until reaching 7,000. Turn right heading 160, intercept the 138-degree radial of Denver Vortac. Cross super intersection at or above 11,300. Denver departure will be 123.85, squawk 1425.
SIDs and STARS eliminate the need to repeat this type of lengthy clearance and to wait for a readback from every aircraft departing and landing at a busy airport. The previous clearance might sound like this when issued as a SID.
Crusader 90832 Charlie, clear to the Tampa Airport, Denver 5 departure, then as filed. Maintain 15,000, squawk 1425.
By reducing the communications, the chance of misunderstandings between pilots and controllers is greatly reduced. To accept a SID or STAR, or file for one on your flight plan, you must have a description of the procedure in your possession. This may be in either graphic or textual form. Let's begin by looking at a SID. Remember, a standard instrument departure differs from the IFR departure procedure found on the airport chart in that an IFR departure procedure was developed solely to provide obstacle clearance. There are two types of SIDs. With a vector SID, a controller provides vectors for you to intercept a fix or radial along your flight path. With a pilot nav SID, you, as the pilot, have the primary responsibility for navigation. With that in mind, let's examine a typical SID to see how departure information is portrayed. As with other Jeppesen charts, the procedure and location are identified in the upper right corner. The date, index number, and effective date are listed at the top of the chart. Notice that the middle number of the index is a 0, which means the procedure could be a SID, STAR, or profile descent. A SID is further identified with a -3, while a STAR, or profile descent, is identified with a -2. The communications box lists the departure frequency. If you have filed for a SID, you may not receive this frequency in your clearance since it can be found on the standard instrument departure itself. Multiple departure frequencies may be shown for different departure runways and directions of flight. On some SIDs, a note directs you to the graphic portion of the procedure for the desired frequencies. If no departure frequency is shown, you should expect to receive the frequency with your clearance. A SID is often named after the last fix for the common portion of the procedure, prior to the en route transitions. In this case, Altum intersection. This particular procedure is called the Altum 6 departure. When a significant change in the procedure occurs, the name changes to the next higher number. At the next major revision, this SID will be renamed the Altum 7 departure. When filing for an instrument flight and using a SID, you should list the departure code, shown in parentheses, on your flight plan. The use of this code facilitates the acceptance of your flight plan by the Air Route Traffic Control Center's computer, which in turn expedites your IFR clearance. If you do not want to use a SID or STAR, indicate no SID, no STAR in the remarks section of your flight plan. Any restrictions or special information about the procedure will be shown next. For instance, this particular SID is used only for runways 1, 2, left, and right. Other notes may indicate that only turbojet aircraft can use the procedure, that radar is required, and that DME is required for departures from specific runways. Before we take a close look at how the Altum 6 departure is flown, let's look at the aircraft performance required to guarantee obstacle clearance. An obstacle-free flight path is based on your aircraft climbing at 200 feet per nautical mile after it crosses the end of the runway at least 35 feet above the ground. In addition, you must be able to climb to 400 feet above the airport elevation before reaching a point where a turn is required. A slope of 152 feet per nautical mile is assessed for obstacles. If none penetrate this slope, the 200 foot per mile gradient provides you with a minimum of 48 feet of obstacle clearance for each mile of flight. If obstacles do penetrate this slope, special avoidance procedures are specified. These procedures might include a ceiling and visibility minimum that allows the obstacles to be seen and avoided. They could also include detailed flight maneuvers. Or they could require climb gradients greater than 200 feet per mile. These procedures can be used by themselves or in any combination. This SID, for example, requires a minimum climb of 350 feet per nautical mile to 5,000 feet. Because the gradient is in feet per nautical mile and your VSI measures feet per minute, Jeppesen provides a table located on the chart to help you convert climb gradient to climb rate. Now let's continue by reviewing additional graphic symbols on the chart. On pilot nav SIDS, the departure route is identified by bold lines. These routes lead to the fix where the SID terminates. Many SIDs incorporate transition routes, shown by the dashed lines, that are used to connect the basic SID to en route airways or jet routes. These transition routes are normally named after the fix where they end. For instance, the Linden transition route terminates at the Linden Vortac. Radar vectoring, shown by a line of arrowheads, is used for some SIDs when ATC provides navigational guidance to your filed or assigned route or to a fix depicted on the chart. The note states that after departing, expect vectors to your assigned route, fix, or transition. The SID and STAR charts may not be drawn to scale since the routes and nav aids often cover large geographical areas. This notation lets you know that distances cannot be measured accurately with a plotter. In most cases, the direct distance from the airport or runway to the SID fix is given. This value is included to help you determine the approximate mileage for flight planning purposes. To see how a standard instrument departure is flown, let's combine the textual description of the Altum 6 departure with the graphic portrayal of the SID. We'll begin at the airport, where the runway layout is depicted, along with the airport name and elevation. To help you identify the primary airport from which the SID begins, an airport depiction screen is provided. The graphic also shows that the San Jose VOR DME is located on the field. On both SIDs and STARS, the nav aid identification is given in a shadow box. When departing runway 12 left or right, your initial climb is via a heading of 122 degrees. Maintain this heading to intercept and fly outbound on the 129-degree radial from Oakland Vortac. The Oakland nav aid data is shown above this section of the chart. At an altitude of 4,000 feet, turn left to a 300-degree heading. Continue your climb and maintain this heading to intercept the 004-degree radial from San Jose. An altitude restriction indicates that you should intercept the radial at or above 5,000 feet. Proceed outbound on the 004-degree radial to Altum intersection. A special note states that turbojet aircraft must cross the San Jose 16 DME fix at or above 11,000 feet. Once you reach Altum intersection, proceed along your assigned route or transition route, whichever is appropriate to your clearance. This particular SID offers two transition routes, Sacramento and Linden. The transition route's name and its computer code are shown both in the textual description and along the route. To fly the Altum 6 departure and Linden transition, you should include this code on your flight plan. To continue to Linden, you would fly inbound on the 229-degree radial of Linden. Your course would be 049 degrees. The distance along this transition is 39 nautical miles. Notice that this transition lies along Victor 28. The MEA for the route is 4,500 feet. When lost communications procedures are different from FAR Part 91, they are shown on the chart. Diagonal slashes outline the procedure. This particular chart also includes a graphic portrayal of the flight track to use if communications are lost. When reviewing a vector SID, you'll find that, unlike pilot nav SIDs, most are not computer coded, since the departures normally do not end at a specific fix, intersection, or nav aid. Instead, the charts indicate that ATC provides radar vectors to numerous fixes. You can incorporate any of these locations into the departure. Notice that the procedure does not contain any departure or transition routes. This SID is divided by a line of small telephone symbols. Each half contains a departure control frequency. You'll normally be instructed to use the frequency within the sector where the first fix for your route is located. Since ATC is providing course guidance, vector SIDs are easy to follow. For this procedure, the textual description states that if you're cleared as filed, you should expect radar vectors to your filed or assigned route. After departure, you must maintain 5,000 feet or the assigned lower altitude. This is important because without an additional clearance, this becomes your last assigned altitude in case of radio failure. The instructions also state that you can expect clearance to your requested altitude or flight level 10 minutes after departure. For some vector SIDs, the takeoff minimums vary depending on the departure runway. In this example, the procedure is not even authorized for runway 9. For the remaining runways, the applicable minimums and gradients are shown along with the climb rate conversion table. Some SIDs also contain a caution statement to ensure obstacle clearance. The caution is for aircraft departing westbound from Denver between the 230 and 300 degree radials. If you're flying this SID and have not received a climb clearance above 14,000 feet prior to reaching 25 nautical miles from the VORTAC, you're expected to squawk ident, climb immediately to 16,000 feet, and advise ATC. While SIDs take you from the airport to the en route structure, stars begin in the en route environment and continue down to an outer fix, instrument approach fix, or an arrival waypoint serving the destination airport. In most cases, radar vectors are then provided for interception of the final approach course. Stars look very similar to SIDs because the heading, routes, codes, narrative description, and symbols use the same basic format. One difference, however, is found in the communications section. Stars often list the ATIS frequency, but may omit the frequency box altogether if it is not provided by the governing authority. The RISTI-2 arrival is a typical star because it consists of transition routes and an arrival route from which you can expect radar vectors to the final approach course. Assuming you filed the Manteca transition, you would fly outbound from the Vortac on the 215-degree radial. The transition information is nearly the same as that shown on a SID, with the name, computer code, MEA, and distance provided. However, for a star, the transition is named for the point of origin, and the transition code is listed before the arrival code. This transition ends at the 22 DME fix from Manteca, which is the Risti intersection. From there, the arrival route continues along the same radial. Once you reach Seeds intersection, the remainder of the arrival is accomplished with radar vectors to the airport. Since radar vectors cause the distance from Seeds to the airport to vary, an exact mileage figure is not available. For planning purposes, however, the direct distance to the airport is shown. Some stars have unique features. For example, the name of this star is the Hadley 1 arrival. However, when reviewing the procedure, notice that it doesn't start at Hadley, but instead begins at the Big Sur Vortac. It then passes through Hadley intersection and ends at Sausalito. From there, you can expect radar vectors. Another example of a star with a unique feature is the Gibbon 4 arrival at Fresno, California. Notice that from Topi intersection, the arrival route is via the 19 DME arc from Clovis Vortac. Upon reaching the 102-degree radial, radar vectors are provided to intercept the runway 29 right localizer course. When runway 11 left is being used for landings, you will not fly the DME arc. Instead, expect radar vectors from Topi to intercept the localizer back course. Profile descents are similar to stars and are designed for high-performance aircraft to expedite arrivals, conserve fuel, and reduce the amount of low-altitude flying. A profile descent is essentially an uninterrupted descent from a cruising altitude or flight level. It ends upon glide slope interception or when you reach the appropriate minimum altitude specified for the initial or intermediate approach segment, or when ATC begins providing radar vectors. It's essential to note that a clearance to fly a profile descent does not constitute a clearance to fly an instrument approach procedure. In reviewing the runway 24 and 25 profile descent, notice the procedure shows essentially the same types of navigational data as a star. As you begin your descent beyond Fillmore, your route of flight is depicted by bold arrows. The intersections along the way signify course changes and restrictions to your altitude and airspeed. For example, you must cross Simon intersection between 12,000 and 15,000 feet and at a speed of 280 knots. Notice that flight information items which can be read on your instrument panel are shown in bold type. You must also cross Sadi intersection at an indicated airspeed of 250 knots. ATC may alter crossing restrictions after the procedure has been issued and accepted. When a change to the altitude or route is issued, the remaining portion of the charted procedure is canceled. ATC will then provide you with the necessary altitude, route, and speed clearances. If you're only issued a revision to the depicted airspeed, all charted airspeed restrictions become void. However, the charted altitudes and routes are not affected. If you cannot comply with a charted route or altitude due to the speed revision, you must immediately advise ATC. Since the charted procedure is canceled with the issuance of an altitude or route change, the minimum en route altitudes are shown for each route segment. These altitudes are important in case of radio failure, since maintaining them ensures acceptable navigational signal reception and meets obstacle clearance requirements. SIDS, stars, and profile descents are published primarily to help simplify complex clearances, reduce frequency congestion, and control the flow of traffic to and from busy terminal areas. A knowledge of their benefits and limitations will help simplify your departures and arrivals at the airports served by these procedures.